Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Poland once again for the first time in what feels like a good little while. Now, we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before, and as I've told you on many an occasion, the Polish have some really good craft breweries these days, and they're getting bigger and bigger, and there's more and more of them popping up. So if you do get the chance to try some Polish craft beers, I highly recommend that you do. But the brewery we're going to have a look at today are a relatively new brewery, but in their short existence they've been very prolific. They do lots and lots of different styles, and they have had some really good write-ups for their beer as well. Now, the one we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden. One of their first releases as well, I should point out. It's a style that I very much enjoy, but one that you don't find all that often these days, and that was the main reason why I wanted to try this one, as well as introducing a new Polish brewery here on the channel. So yeah, this one is supposed to be very nice. Needless to say, I'm very curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Skaradowo, which is in the Browar Valley in the southwest of Poland, and we're going to have a look then at my first beer from Browar Nepomucen. So this particular beer is called Into the Wild. It comes in at 9.7% ABV, and they're describing this one as a West Coast Imperial IPA. So yeah, 9.7% ABV, it's very close to the West Coast Triple IPA border. I would always say that anything above 10% is a Triple IPA, but it's a very strong double West Coast IPA nonetheless. But yeah, an impressive hop bill on this one as well, and I've had some very good West Coast IPAs from Poland in the past, and that was another thing that kind of attracted me to this one actually. But yeah, we'll just crack on then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. And I will apologise in advance in this video for any bad Polish pronunciations, but I will promise to do my best. So yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I'll do in the future from Browar Nepomucen. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Polish playlist along with a number of other things, and I'm hoping we can add to that more in the future. So let me know your Polish beer and brewery recommendations in the comment section below, but you can also check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Browar Nepomucen. So, Browar Nepomucen, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Skaradowo, which is quite close to the Browar Valley National Park, which you'll find between Wrocław to the south and Poznań to the north. So the brewery was founded back in 2015 by Piotr and Mariusz Muzielak, who were both home brewers that decided to take their hobby a bit more seriously and turn professional and get into the industry. But both brothers are also motorbike enthusiasts, and they apparently travel across Europe visiting various different breweries, and they have in fact produced a number of collaboration beers by simply kind of riding up there, meeting people and saying hello and things like that, from what I understand. But the brewery is based in a 100-year-old bakery close to their parents' family farm, and the farm of course is run by Tadeusz and Stefania. But the farm is apparently 40 hectares, and historically they used to farm pigs, but after the children left home, Tadeusz started working on different projects around the land. So one of the first ones was that he made a hall that he intended as a meeting place for the family, but then many friends joined and then kind of suggested to him that he expand it and turn it into a business, and so that's exactly what he did. So apparently in there he installed an oven, and he started making bread, and also he installed a smokery as well and started making cold smoked meats. But these days they also produce various different wines and liqueurs, many of which contain ingredients that are cultivated on the farmland. So going back to the brewery side of things, Piotr has a background as an architect, and he runs his own firm called Sigma. And with his activities there, he met a guy called Jacek Domagalski, who had been a home brewer for about 8 years at the time. But this meeting got him interested in brewing beer for himself, and when he got into this, he infected Mariusz with his enthusiasm, and so they decided to start the brewery, taking in Jacek as their head brewer. But they painstakingly restored the old brewery building, investing a large amount of their own money, taking some bank loans and also receiving money from EU investment funds, and they got it up and running, and by 2015 they were ready to produce the first beers. But over the years they've continually developed the brewery infrastructure by adding more fermentation tanks. They've also got a sour beer programme and a barrel programme as well, which is actually quite impressive when you look at it. And this year, in April 2023, they've just installed a new 50 hectolitre brew kit, and this is going to increase the brewery capacity quite dramatically. And I have to say, these guys are one of the first breweries who are kind of putting their beers out there across the European continent. Actually, we're seeing more and more Polish breweries getting their beer out there. These guys, Funky Fluid, and amongst others, are starting to push their beers out across the European continent a little bit more, which is nice to see. And for us in kind of Western and Northern Europe, Polish beer is great because it's good quality and it's actually pretty cheap for us too. But as of June 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 460 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And as I mentioned to you, they do a whole host of different styles. So I'm in no doubt that you'll find something that you'll enjoy from Browar Nepomucen if you take a look. But yeah, that is everything that I can really tell you about Browar Nepomucen for the moment. I do hope my Polish pronunciations weren't too bad. But if you want to learn more about these guys, I'll put the link to their Facebook and Instagram page. They don't have a website yet as far as I can see, but you can follow them on the Facebook and Instagram and keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Beer Advocate, Rate Beer and Untappd pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a wee look at the beer itself. So I'll let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. So you can see it's got a nice kind of forest background to it, which kind of suits the name Into the Wild. You can see plain silver top on the can here, and this one is a half-litre can, which I'll point out, which for a 9.7% is a wee bit dangerous, but you know, that's just how they do it in Poland. A lot of the beers are sold in the half-litre cans rather than the 440s. But the hops in this one are Mosaic, Citra and Simcoe. So these are kind of a little bit more old school hops that we know quite well. All three of them, of course, from America. Mosaic is about 14% alpha acid, going to give you a lovely kind of tangerine note. Citra, of course, one of the really old school ones along with Simcoe. But Citra is going to give you a nice kind of juicy mango and a bit of an oily passion fruit and grapefruit in a West Coast IPA, and more of a kind of gooseberry and lemon limey character actually in the West Coast IPA as well. Then Simcoe's about 12% alpha acid, and it's going to give you a nice kind of oily passion fruity quality. I actually can't remember how much I paid for this beer, and I will point out that I've had this one for maybe 5 or 6 months or something like that. It kind of got pushed to the back of the fridge because I couldn't find the information on this brewery. And I was quite lucky today, just when I thought, oh, have a look at this again and see if anything new's come out, and I managed to find like an old school Polish magazine article that told me everything I wanted to know about the Musielak family and stuff like this. So yeah, that was pretty cool. But like I say, a 9.7% West Coast Imperial double, nearly triple, whatever you want to call it, IPA. Let's get this guy out and into the glass there and see what it's all about. Definitely cool to try my first Polish beer in quite a wee while actually, even though I was there only in February or so. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. I think that'll do for the moment for us to take a little look at this thing. So yeah, anyway, as you can see, this beer's poured pretty much as you would expect of a West Coast IPA. So before the head disappears, we can say that it's poured with about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say, perfect white head there. It looks very nice, like a few kind of medium sized bubbles on the top there, and then a few fluffier ones, smaller fluffier ones, just going up towards the bottom of the head. But overall, it looks very, very nice. In terms of the colour of this beer, this one I would say is a kind of very nice, light, almost hellish, pale golden straw colour in this one actually. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head. But yeah, it looks pretty nice. So like I say, a kind of pale golden straw colour, this one. And for me, I would always say that West Coast IPAs can go two ways. They can be a little bit more kind of bready and biscuity, such as the Russian River Pliny the Elder, or they can be a little bit more oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, or they can be somewhere in the middle, of course, too. But for me, those are the two ends of the spectrum with West Coast IPAs. And remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do, or adjuncts that you put into the beer, will affect the colour as well. But yeah, you don't often have to care about that when it comes to IPAs. And I would say that, judging by the colour of this one, I think this is going to be a more bready and biscuity affair, such as the Pliny the Elder, to be honest with you. Just telling from this one, it looks very nice. A little bit of natural haze to it. But to be honest, I think that's everything we really need to say about the appearance of this beer. So we should go on and have a little look at the aroma and see what we get. Yeah. That's quite interesting. I wonder, does this have a little bit of pine needle or something in it? Forest West Coast Imperial IPA. This one, I think this has got a little bit of spruce tip or pine needle. Or, I was right. Yeah, now it says on the side here, I never noticed that before. So they've added some spruce and pine twigs into this one, which makes sense, actually, yeah, when they're calling it a Forest West Coast IPA. Yeah, that's quite clever. So obvious in the beginning, actually. I thought this was going to be a kind of pure old school West Coast IPA, but apparently not. It's got a wee bit of a twist to it. So yeah, kudos to them for trying something a wee bit different. But yeah, straight away with this one, you can smell this. It's the spruce tips that jump out at me. And the reason that I know spruce tips quite well with beer is because I had a number of beers in Estonia that had spruce tips. Spruce tips are actually very good to use, in my experience, with alcohol-free beers. They're really nice that way. But yeah, you can smell the spruce tips, for me, dominate the aroma of this beer. It's actually a little bit hard to smell the other stuff out of it, in fairness. So just see if my nose... The thing is, if you have something like this, your nose will quite often get saturated in the beginning, but it will just open up a little bit later on. But yeah, when your nose does adjust to it, you start to get more and more of the actual West Coast IPA coming out of the beer, which is good, obviously. That's what we want. So yeah, the backbone of the beer, you absolutely get a little bit of that kind of fresh, white bready bread crust coming out of this one. You can feel that in there. There's a teeny little bit of woody character as well, mixing in with the malt base. But the malt base is pretty kind of straightforward. You can smell that it's kind of a mix of like wholemeal brown bread and fluffy white bread. I would say that. But you can smell, like I say, the spruce tips and the pine needles or whatever that they've put into this one. They really just dominate the aroma. They saturate it almost. Now I'm pretty sure they won't saturate the flavour, of course, but you do have to shugo this beer up to get the more malty elements out of it. So yeah, when you shugo the beer, you do start to get the really nice... You get more and more of the bready character out of this one. So like I say, there's a bit of wholemeal brown bread in there. There's a little bit of a kind of more white bready character as well. And then you have the sweeter aspects to this beer too. So for me, the sweeter aspects are a little bit more kind of... You do have quite a little bit of a caramelly character out of the beer, which I like. You can smell a little bit of sweet caramel in the middle of the nose. You've also got a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity character in there too. So yeah, a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit in there. You've got a little bit of a... it's got a little bit of a kind of sweeter caramel too. And yeah, it is actually, like I say, it's just a little bit hard to pick up some of these elements coming out of this one, but I think it goes together really nicely. Yeah. So, I don't know if there's much more to say about the malty side of things. I'd like to say it is a little bit harder to pick it up. So on the hoppy side of things, the green component, if you like, as I've said already, you're getting quite a lot of you're obviously getting a lot of stuff coming out from the spruce tip and the pine needles in this one. But yeah, you can certainly pick up a little bit of, there's a teeny little bit of earthiness behind it. You can smell a more oily, floral, aromatic sort of thing. It's almost a little bit spicy. And you do get a nice little bit of a kind of grassy character too. Now the thing you need to remember with West Coast IPAs is that they rely a lot more on early edition hopping than the New England hazy variety do. So yeah, if you're talking about IPAs, there are 3 different ways to hop these. So we use a 90-minute wort boil as our model. In the first hour of the wort boil, that's called early edition hopping. So that gives you mainly bitterness in your beer, and it gives you a deep, dank aroma. And in the last half hour of the wort boil, that's called late edition hopping. That gives you mainly flavour and aroma, but a little bit of bitterness, and that usually translates to a very bright, floral and grassy aroma from the hops. But then dry hopping, which comes after the wort boil is complete, it's all about flavour and aroma, and again that gives you a very bright green component. So yeah, the way that goes together is it's really nice in this one. So West Coast IPAs tend to rely on all 3 types of hoppings, but they've got the early edition hopping. New England IPAs tend to use late edition and dry hopping, which is why they're less bitter and dank and stuff like this. So yeah, as I say, but yeah, the fruity, other than that, I don't think we need to say too much about the green component in this one, but the fruity side of the beer is quite interesting. You can smell all the nice oily fruity characters from these hops in there. So I do get a little bit of a stronger grapefruit, which will be from the Citra. So yeah, a little touch of a stronger grapefruit in there. Then you have a wee bit of a more kind of oily passion fruity quality as well. So yeah, a little touch of a more oily passion fruity quality in there, and then you start to get a wee bit more. I get a little touch of like pineapple out of this one, but that's very, very minimal. But then you can smell the sort of gooseberry, the lemon limey characters coming out of the beer, and also a bit of that kind of tangerine orange from the Mosaic. So the Simcoe's going to give you an oily passion fruit, the Mosaic's going to give you the kind of tangerine orange, but all the other notes that I mentioned I think are mainly going to come from the Citra. The Citra's the most complex out of those 3 hops, I would say. The other thing the Mosaic's going to give you is a little bit of the earthiness too. But yeah, aroma-wise, it's quite an interesting one, this, but you do really have to search for these things that I'm kind of pointing out in this one, because the spruce tips and the pine needles are very, very dominant, actually. But as I always say, take a bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think we can have a look at this one now and see what it's all about. So yeah, let's do this then. Let's put a wee bit more into the glass and we'll have a taste of it. So yeah, let's do this. So this one is the Into the Wild, a Mosaic, Citra and Simcoe hopped West Coast Imperial IPA at 9.7% ABV, with also a little bit of pine twig and spruce tip added into it. So let's have a taste of this. My first beer from Browar Nepomucen. And yeah, let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, na zdrowie. Oh yeah. That is quite interesting, I have to say. The thing is with this, what you're going to find is that the spruce tips and the pine needles and stuff really come out more and more the further into the aftertaste you go. But in the beginning, you get like just what feels like a normal West Coast IPA. But yeah, you can feel the adjuncts coming out of this one later on. And I think this is other than the alcohol-free ones, I honestly think this is the first time that I've tried a West Coast IPA with adjuncts in it like this. So yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, in terms of the the beer, generally speaking, like it is, I'm glad with this one, because one of the things that's happened with West Coast IPAs in recent times is that a lot of the newer ones, they've taken the bitterness of these beers down, but they haven't really with this one. But it's kind of aided in a sense, and it's a bit difficult to tell how much of the bitterness is coming from the hop and how much of it is coming from the kind of piney resins and stuff like this. So the piney needles and spruce tips, I should say. But I like this. I really do like what they've done with this one. So let's try and break it down then and describe this beer properly in depth. But I'm glad it's got the bitterness. So many of the newer West Coast IPAs don't, and the reason for that is that a lot of new craft beer drinkers got in to IPAs and stuff through the West Coast ones, which are the East Coast, the New England hazies. That's what I mean, which obviously have a lower bitterness. But let's look at this. So, middle third of your palate then. You've got a lovely little bit of a kind of fresh, white bready base in the middle of that, the middle third of your palate there. So you can feel that fresh white bready bread crust forming the backbone of the beer. Further forward on that middle third of your palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of woody, smoothness in there too, which is really nice. But above that, there's a little bit of an almost crackery dryness, and then you start to get some of the bready characteristics out of the beer. We've still got a little bit left in the can of this one. One thing I will also point out about this beer is straight away is that it covers its alcohol very, very well actually. So yeah, in terms of the bready character then, so above that little crackery layer that I was talking about, you start to get a little bit more of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready type thing going on. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready character coming out of the beer. And then above that, you have a little bit of a, you do definitely have a little bit of a sort of kind of fluffier white bready character as well. So yeah, you've got the wholemeal brown bread, then the fluffier white bread above that, and then you start to get some of the sweeter kind of brown sugary notes out of the beer. So above the kind of white bread, you've got a little bit of a very, very lightly toasty kind of brown sugary note. Then you can feel there's a sort of oily, biscuity type layer, and in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel there's a sweeter caramelly note in there. And the more that I drink of this one, the more I can taste the booze on the beer, which isn't a surprise when it's 9.7% ABV. So yeah, dead centre of your palate is where you're getting the sweet caramel notes, where the alcohol is coming out of the beer, and that's to be expected of the style. But yeah, as you move further out from that, you get a little touch of a Werther's Original butter candy. You get the more biscuity notes, as I've said, and the biscuity notes kind of spread out toward the edge of that middle third of your palate. So that's really nice how that goes together. So yeah, in terms of the the middle third of your palate, I think that's everything we really need to say, to be honest. I don't think there is anything else. But yeah, you can feel the kind of pine needles and spruce tips just kind of creeping in from the sides of your palate with this beer too, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a sort of bready build up in there, which is great. So a lovely little bit of bready build up, a little bit of brown bread in the base, and a little bit of a white bread character coming up on top of that. But then the base of that back third of the palate, you've got a little bit more of a kind of fresh, you can feel a little bit of that more kind of fresh, brown bready bread crust in there. It's a little bit, as I've always said, on the back third of the palate you get more bitter and dry sort of flavours compared to further forward. The sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, of course, but you get similar flavours in the back third of your palate to the middle third of the palate, but they just come out in different intensities. So yeah, you've got that bread crusty base there, which feels a little bit drier. Then you've got a wee bit of a more kind of dry, crackery note above that. Then you've got a more kind of fluffy, brown bready character coming out of this one. And you can feel that that's a little bit taller and more airy than it was in the middle third of the palate. Then the white bready character above that is a little bit fluffy and more airy as well. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I have to say, is very, very nice. So it gets a thumbs up from me. But yeah, in terms of the back third of the palate, then above that, oh, I'm going to sneeze. No, I'm not. Above the kind of white bready layer on that back third of the palate, you do get a little touch of kind of drier, biscuity character just creeping over the top, and then above everything else, you start to get the yeasty notes out of the beer. So for me, the yeasty notes are kind of like, it's like a slightly more doughy, brown bready character there. It's got a bit of woodiness and a bit of cracker to it, almost a bit of a farmhousey bread, and then it's just kind of wrapped in a little bit of a kind of honeycomb sweetness. I always get honeycomb on the back third of the palate for some reason. I really couldn't tell you why, but definitely. We can also say that the back third of the palate, the flavour is taller, and as you come further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, I do quite like how that goes together. So a thumbs up from me. So, in terms of the hoppy side of things, then we'll move on to that. Yeah, and I will say the hoppy and adjuncty side of things kind of merge together in this beer. So, in the back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness in there, and that will be from the mosaic, I would think. But as you move further forward, it does get quite pine resiny and spruce tippy very quickly, so you can feel there is a little bit of floral aromaticity, like a little bit of spiciness on the front corners of your palate, but the sort of oily nature of the spruce tips and the piney needles added into the beer kind of sits there on the side of your palate. Round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, but then yeah, you've got quite a little bit of zestiness in there and a wee bit of the kind of pine needly resin too coming out of this one, which I find quite interesting. So, yeah, I like how this goes together too. So, in terms of the green component of this beer, as I would call it, I think that's everything we need to say. But yeah, we can look at the front third of your palate and the fruity side of things then. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up in there, a little bit of brown bread in the base and a little bit of white bread sitting on top of that. Then the base of that front third of your palate, you get a really nice little bit of I would say like a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of thing coming out of this one. So yeah, a little touch of bread crusty character in there. On top of that, there's a wee bit of brown bread, there's a wee bit of white bread, and that goes together really nicely. And then above that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just kind of roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, the way that all of that goes together is nice too. But we'll look at the fruity side of things then and what we're actually getting from the hops. So, yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of stronger grapefruity note in there, which will come from the citra. And then as you move further forward, you get a slightly more pungent, well, not more pungent than the grapefruit, you do get a little bit of a pungent passion fruit out of this one, and it kind of mellows out until you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, and you start to get a little bit more of a kind of oily mango out of this one. But when you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you start to get more of the kind of lemon and limey character of the Citra as well. And there is a wee bit of the orange from the Mosaic, but I really feel in this beer, the Mosaic takes a little bit of a back seat, to be honest with you. Yeah, the Mosaic is there just behind you. You get that little oily bit behind the very front tip of your tongue. And you can feel a wee bit of the oily, orangey character from the Mosaic coming out the more that you drink of it. But yeah, the pine resiny and spruce tippy notes in this beer kind of dominate everything. I'd be very curious to know like how much they put in per litre or whatever, because it is a really nice idea, and I think it adds a lot of bitterness and things into the beer. It makes it feel quite old school, but yeah, it does work really quite well. But these flavours do dominate a little bit. So yeah, it would be interesting to try the original West Coast IPA and see what it was like, and then try this one alongside it. But regardless, I think this has been a really interesting one to try. Actually, I have had, I've got a feeling I had a black IPA with like spruce tips and stuff added into it as well from Pohjala in Estonia, and it was them that were, when I mentioned the alcohol-free beers earlier, it was them that were playing around with spruce tips and pine needles and stuff like that, from what I remember too. But yeah, this is a really, it's a really interesting concept, this one, I have to say. So it gets a thumbs up from me, and I like this beer. I wouldn't hesitate to drink this one again, but maybe not every day. It'd be cool to try a few more of these a little bit later on down the line. But yeah, really nicely done stuff, so it gets a thumbs up from me. On the yeah, on the mouthfeel side of things, I think we said everything we need to about the flavour of the beer. So for me, the mouthfeel of this beer, it's kind of, I would say that it is probably top end and mid bodied. The carbonation is very smooth, and it does have a slightly slick mouthfeel to it, which I do like. And yeah, that feature of it is really quite nice. So a lovely kind of slicker, more slick mouthfeel to this one, which I do enjoy. And then you have a good little bit of bitterness to this beer. I want to say this one is maybe, I think this is maybe about 70-ish IBUs, something like that. It's not going to blow the head off you in terms of IBU, and some of that could be my fault, because obviously this beer has been sitting a little bit, but you are getting some nice bitterness from the spruce tips and the pine needles and stuff like that as well. But the malt base in this one, you've got a lovely little bit of kind of dryness underneath, you've got some smoothness in the middle and a bit of oily sweetness on the top. Then you've got that big oily, fruity character coming out of this one too, which I think is really very nice. But yeah, I think this one goes together really nicely, and it does get a big thumbs up from me. I think this is this has been really cool to try. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This has been the Into the Wild West Coast Double IPA at 9.7% ABV, with a lot of nice kind of spruce tip and pine needle bitterness added into it from the adjuncts. But yeah, it works pretty well, this one, I have to say, and something quirky to try, which is what you want, having reviewed 3,800 beers over the years. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So yeah, really cool to introduce Browar Nepomucen for you on the channel for the first time. I hope you guys enjoyed my take on this beer. Check out my social media, check out theirs, let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Browar Nepomucen. But I will catch you guys in another review very soon. This was the Into the Wild, a 9.7% West Coast Double Forest IPA, whatever you want to call it, from Browar Nepomucen. And I've forgotten it, Sarkadovo, if I remember the name of the town correctly, in the southwest of Poland. But until the next time, Slange, Skål, cheers, and na zdrowie.